Okay, so so we're going to be going live soon, and then okay, first we want to apologize. We were streaming to my page because I am not that great at technology. So it's streamed on my page. We're now up and running on the Voices of Color page, and I will take the segment that was that not everybody got to see, and I will put it onto our page. So it'll be a complete video once we're done. You'll get all of that information. Some of you were already able to see it, so we're just going to continue on. Draven gave us some amazing information about who he is and what he does for Indigenous people, First Nations people, family man, really a general voice for people who may not always have a voice in and out of the SCA. Since we had that tiny break, I did want to ask about your shirt. Most people are not familiar with ribbon shirts, and so they may not understand the significance of it and why it's important. Would you mind talking about that a little bit?
Sure, yeah. This shirt was made by my mother. She makes them. There's a process beyond just the general sewing that goes into the shirts themselves, because they're considered part of a ceremonial, I guess, dress for people taking part in ceremonies as well too. So this is something that I would wear to, I guess, everything from, like, say, I think you're going to start to see a little bit more of this. You're seeing it actually with the ribbon skirts for the women, but for the ribbon shirts for the guys, that's kind of our, I guess, our ceremonial type of dress. And this is something that we would wear to actual spiritual ceremonies, plus also large key events, especially if they're Indigenous or non-Indigenous. So if I were accepting an award, I wouldn't be in a suit and tie. I'd be wearing a ribbon shirt, because that is honoring the culture, and it's a special occasion in that sense. And actually, I wore this ribbon shirt when I got married too. I just realized that too. So I wore it when we did get married, and we got married by a matriarchal chief from the local area, who's been a good friend of me and my family for more than a decade for sure. Knows my mom really well, and that's Judy Wilson. So you Google Judy Wilson and you'll see how outspoken she is, especially around environmental rights and such, not only within her territory, but around BC as well too. So yeah, that kind of explains that. There's like how she does it as well too, is she does pray, and like everything she does, she has to do with, so it isn't just making the shirt. Like there's a lot around smudging and putting good thoughts into it. If she's not having a good day, she's not going to sew a shirt like this, because part of those will be imparted upon the garment itself as well too. So it's pretty careful work of what happens. And so normally most Indigenous people don't have like a wardrobe full of these. There's usually just like one or two. And if you do, I've talked to guys that have had where they've been given some, and they have like two or three, and then what they do is they give them to someone else. So they're actually given to someone and said, "You need, do you have one?" And I think this should go to you. And it's just more on a feeling type of thing. So I think eventually I will pass this on for sure. But I only have one. I had two, and I think I gave it to my younger brother. So yeah.
I was kind of looking at where. Doing some research on ribbon shirts, and really there were a whole bunch of sites that popped up on how to, where to buy them, and didn't really talk about the significance, didn't really talk about the artist and whether or not they were actually Indigenous, and or some of the sites I couldn't even tell if they were just mass produced and kind of done in for lack of a better word, done for financial gain. Can you talk a little bit about appropriation and how to find authentic artists that you can contribute to without taking something that is sacred, that is important to a culture, kind of along those lines.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's just like anywhere else. If you're doing research, you want to make sure that the source is valid. I mean, if you're doing research and someone writes a paper in academia, you'd see, okay, is this someone with education? Is it a PhD? Or is it just some person who's writing in a blog? I mean, that validates the authenticity. The same thing with Indigenous knowledge keepers. Are they recognized as people within a nation or a group as an expert, especially if it's language or culture? Because sometimes you have a language expert and there's no spirituality. They may follow Christian beliefs. So I'd go to them for the language, but I wouldn't go to them to talk about specifically spirituality in that sense. So you kind of leave that out of the conversation because they're not an expert in that area. So I would say for cultural appropriation is that's where it's, I think, a little bit more difficult. And sometimes you can your Google foo can totally help out with that to some degree. I actually looked at, I did some research recently, so especially around the ribbon shirts, and I saw it was because I'm a part of a number of websites that are Indigenous based. So they go far back. So this is not like, this is not something that just happened like in 1930 all the way to present. Like this went way further back into, we're talking like late 18th century or 1890s and such there. And you start to see like French silk being traded for other things. And I've seen like museum archive photos of various, like in Canada, in the US as well too. So it really depends where that is. And no, I can say, and you'll find this as well too. If someone says this is the way it is for Indigenous, that's usually a BS kind of thing. For me, all I'll say is, according to Woodland Cree and my beliefs and what I've been taught, this works for me. I'll never speak on behalf of the Algonquin in Eastern Canada and their beliefs or anything. So I think that's usually a good way if someone's saying, this all Indigenous, this is what they do and everything. It's like, no, it's that's usually a good BS kind of filter right there to know whether you have someone that actually knows what they're talking about or just telling you what you want to hear as well too. So with respect to cultural appropriation, I am a crafts person as well too. So I do my art, which I haven't done in quite some time, is actually akin to Woodland Cree. I know when I was, especially when I went out there and did a lot of artwork, I got asked to do some commissions that were coastal in nature. And I was like, nope, I just refused to. And I said, you want to go do that? Talk to coastal artists. I don't know any offhand that I could refer you to. So you're going to have to find your way. And they're like, but you could do this. I'm like, oh, absolutely. I could do it. But I We're good. Yes, it's good. So I was just saying it was, so I got asked to do artwork for, it was a cowboy bar in Merritt, which is a small town in BC. And they wanted me to do some coastal artwork to westernize it. And so the local culture there, of course, isn't coastal. So it's another, so it was wrong on so many levels that I was like, no, I can't absolutely do this at all. They ended up finding someone that did it, unfortunately, that could bend their morals. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. So cultural appropriation is really honoring the nation. And people, I hear that argument where people are like, well, I want to honor the nation, or I want to honor the people and add more visibility. That there are certainly other ways to do that, to be able to do that without, because you may unintentionally dishonor the people you're trying to actually do the opposite effect of what you intended to do. And so I think so many good things have been done, especially to Indigenous people, that were done in good intentions. And we see this happen in Canada here. We just had an Indigenous minister from Manitoba say that went up on his first day of the job within hours of being sworn in, went up and said, you know what? I think the intentions of the residential school system were that they wanted to provide education and inclusion into our society. Holy crap. That's intention. So when someone says, well, my intentions were good, well, so were his. And I love how an Indigenous MP went in there and spoke truth right to his face and called him on his lies. So that's the kind of stuff that I see happening. Even in today, it just boggles the mind for like, you're still like, especially for people of color, we're like, this is still happening. We're still talking about this. Are you kidding me? So yeah, that's kind of my take on cultural appropriation is like truly honor, do your research, talk to people, especially Indigenous people and knowledge keepers in those areas, and you'll get the perspective on how to do that. And some of it, you know what, they may tell you, you can't do that. You can't wear a ribbon shirt because that's going to be inherently Indigenous, and those are for the people. There's certain ceremonies that certain people can't go to. And it's not much. Like people ask about that, especially Sundance, with where we Sundance with our with the group that my mom will work is, if you're not Indigenous, you're not allowed there. And everybody, starts to get their arms up. Well, I'm not allowed there. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? That's only one ceremony that I know of out of multitudes of others where you're allowed to go to, but not that one. So I'm like, if you can't go to one thing or whatever because of whatever, it's like, I don't know. I can't. There's even for me, there's certain places I can't go because I'm not a club member or I don't know, whatever have you. So yeah, and I don't take arms. I just say, okay, I guess I can't go. So it's hopefully that answers your question.
I did have a question, and kind of whenever I do have one, I'll just raise my hand so Genevieve can see it and note it. So you made a statement, speaking truth to power, right? And I really believe that is something that needs to be done more often. Brene Brown calls it speaking truth to BS. Can you tell me how in your life maybe you've started to do just that, maybe in little ways, just to give examples of how just an average person, not to the prime minister or to a governor or to a mayor, but just in your everyday life can do that and affect change by speaking truth to power?
I think you're going to see that more and more. Myself, I've taken on that role. I don't know why. It has nothing to do with. I think it has nothing actually to do with. I think my voice has greater impact. It actually has nothing to do with that. I just kind of look around from time to time, and I don't see that as much happening around me. It's not like I have voices screaming around me doing it in that sense. And this is not a challenge to Indigenous people as well too. I understand cultures, they're really humble. Like they're really humble in terms of, if they say something, then it's going to be short and sweet and that's it. But too long have we been silent and had others speak for us. And the words that they spoke with good intentions weren't absolutely the truth. And that's why I think if anything, most likely through my mom, I found, and various others, mostly women or matriarchal, spoke the truth and inspired me to find my voice. So when you're talking about that, finding your voice is something that I wish I would have found that, like everybody, of course, when they kind of find their confidence or whatever have you, they wish it would have had that when they were in their teens or in high school or something, because it would have made a big impact on their life. For me, finding my voice, even with the SCA and how good life, I guess, was in terms of playing the game, and then also even in real life, doing well in certain arenas as well too. It's really taken, I would say, this past 5 years to make that shift. And it was actually when I left the SCA for about 4 years. And that was where I found my voice, was in isolation. And people asked, I said, why did Chitietku, why did Savia, why did you guys leave? I said, it wasn't because we're pissed off at anything. We had a marriage to work on, and we had to get that right. We had to get our home right in order to come back out and have some fun. And when we came back out, we came back, and I think people saw that too. And if they didn't, they saw a difference in terms of, I'd like to think there was a maturity there that happened, that the Draven that had left 4 or 5 years ago came back and was just a little surer and less BS. I came back to play this game and to be with friends on my own terms. And it was really to cut the BS out of it. There's certain people that don't like me. It's fine. It's fine. I know. Like you can't go through life pleasing everyone. So, and it's not like I'm telling them to screw off or anything like that. It's like, no, I've reached out to them as well too. And if it's just a waste of time and they're still 6 years in the past, that's fine. Like I've tried for sure. But yeah, finding that voice is integral for sure. And it brought me really more towards, what do you know? Your identity. For me, my identity is Woodlands Cree, and I'm ESL. A lot of people don't know that. My first language is Cree. So I spoke that up until I was, I think, the age of 4 or 5. So, which is frustrating because it's somewhere in here, that language. And I dream in my language, which is weird. I see myself speak in the language and I understand it somewhat. So it's interesting. So when you talk about the voice or whatever, finding your voice, that's a part of it too. So I've been really reconnected with my language and of course my culture as well too. And what do you know, that's opened up a lot of doors in terms of just success and I would say peace as well too. So and for those that are embarking on that journey as well too, it's hard. It is hard because you have to look at yourself. You have to look at decolonizing who you are and to know the people around you as well too. And really it's self-reflection. And I'm not perfect by any stretch at all. But what I can tell you is, and I knew this as well too, because I taught this to at-risk youth in life skills program for about 5 years, is the more you know yourself, the more you will find peace, which, you know what, life's purpose, it's trying to find that peace. I think everybody's so kind of wound up on a lot of things. Whereas, if you have peace, that armor is thicker and the world around you doesn't drag you down as much. And you're better able to bounce back.
I really like the kind of self-reflection and finding yourself. I think for some cultures, like I think of African Americans who may not be able to trace their roots far enough back, or their lineage ended at for the slave trade. And so you had this personal journey and this personal growth. How did that translate to the SCA, or did it?
It did, actually. That's what I found was, like anyone else who's really goal driven, I've taken personality tests as well too. So I'm I think it's called strengths and SDI I'm trying to remember what the D and the I stand for. But I'm red for color. So if anyone has taken those, there's red, green, and blue. And so I'm red, which is performance. So what do you know? In the SCA, that's really where that's really what got me to be involved, especially in Rapier. And that was what hooked me. Didn't care about anything else. Like, people were like, oh, there's ANS over here. There's this other, you could do classes and this. And I'm like, I don't care. Show me where the sword fighters are. And that was what hooked me for probably about a good 5 years. And then I started to really kind of look around me and realize how truly awesome the opportunities were to branch out in different areas. And I certainly didn't go down the rabbit hole in so many different areas, but I became more aware and took classes and also supported other people in their endeavors, whether it was watching archery or whatever. But I went on that path for probably a good, I would say decade and a couple years. And what I did is I adapt, and people of color, you totally understand this as well too, is I adapted because I'm performance based. It's all about performance. And so when I talk to people, I'm very open about that. And they say, well, what kind of white scarf or fighter are you? I said, I'm the one that goes into tournaments and aims to kick butt and win. That's it. So that's what I built my reputation on, was to go and be a tournament fighter. And I was very proud of that for a lot of years, but I gamed the system and I adapted as much as I possibly could to train and do everything for that, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally. And at the end of it, when I came out with the success of, like, say, in this case, it was a white scarf, it was a goal, and achieving that, I sacrificed my own value system as well too, as an Indigenous person, because I realized I realized I had to become more white to get to where I wanted to go. Because here's what I did is I have a strategy on how to get things done. And if I pinball and I just keep hitting that upper ceiling and just bouncing and banging my head and getting bruises, eventually what I'll do is I won't stop, because I know I heard people say that, a grasshopper, if given a ceiling or whatever that's like 4 inches, will hop to 3.5. I didn't do that. What I did is I just went around it. And what I did is as I changed my value system and what made me who I was prior to the SCA, and I used that to game to a level that I could achieve a success, ultimately achieve a success at different areas for awards and whatever have you. And I realized that in the end, because I took stock of it. It wasn't really until I took a break and was away from the SCA that I looked at that. And I realized that I had traded in my value system ultimately. And you'll find actually very few people that are willing to admit this openly. And I think if anyone knows me, I'm not one to just keep everything in and hide and whatever. It's like, no, I hope that my failure in some ways could be a lesson for other people as well too. I wasn't proud of that. Still not proud of that to this day. I would have liked to have done it in a different way, to not trade my value system for something else. And really, it was the approval of others, which and I thought my self-esteem was pretty awesome as well too. But as most people find out, pride and arrogance is actually not self-esteem. It actually is a cover for something else. And I've taught those lessons as well too. In the end, me coming back, it was like, no, I'm absolutely going to have my values, my vertical alignment up front, and to hell with what people think as well too. And I surround myself with people that understand that, but also challenge me. So it's not an echo chamber by any stretch. I have a knight that I'm in a fealty relationship, and that's His Excellency Kieran Azoff, and that man pushes me in different areas, and just to be a better person. And that relationship took a while to kind of come about on the heavy fighting things. So and he challenges me, and that's ultimately what you want to have in a mentor as well too. So, but I have other people as well too that push and challenge me as well too. So thank you.
It's difficult. So I think every person of color, and we talked about this in the first show, learns how to code switch, learns how to be successful in a supremacist society, and do often lose our values, can sometimes lose our identities. I know that in modern life, in order to be successful in a large organization, I had to become this person and lost myself. Getting into DEI made me realize that it is really important to be your authentic self and align your values. But I know I experienced barriers in doing that, and mostly because folks viewed me and knew me one way, and then trying to break that image was one of the barriers I faced. So what have been some of the barriers that you faced when you started to become your authentic self and really dive into your core identities and values.
Just looking at the question, I love how the text is on there.
Yes, it's helpful.
I read Brene Brown, by the way. One of her books. I want to know. I know she's got others, and she's moved into various areas. So, I think the barriers, some of the barriers that I have, was I had to accept that as a result of changing that direction on who I want to be. Like when I left, I had a whole household, so I don't have a household anymore. So there's a lot of things that changed. So fealty relationships, who I hang out with as well too. It's not because it has nothing to do with I think I'm better or whatever. It's just when you grow as a person, you kind of shed skin like a snake. It's a bad analogy because people are gonna be, oh yeah, Draven's really snake-like. But you do that's part of that evolution, is that the people that you start the journey on will not be the same people that you'll end the journey on as well too. And I mean, like, and if anyone who's 30 years or older or 40 years older knows that there are people that started off with that journey in your family or friends no longer with you. They're just not. Some have died. Like I've had grandparents, both my grandparents have died. So they started off that journey with me, but they're no longer here on this earth, in spirit world for sure. And it's accepting that, if anything, because like attracts like, and that's what inspires me, is to find other people that are on that path. So I would say my friendships have changed. Definitely, in terms of who I value time, and I will travel to Alberta to have conversations with people like Albrecht and Nishida, and people like Corsac, and people just a whole host of people that I love and care for. And so I found that, whereas before, the only reason I went to areas was to fight. And that was my motivation. Now I'm like, yeah, I like fighting. But now it's more to sit down at a campfire or sit down in someone's living room and talk till 3 or 4 a.m. about real cool personal growth stuff and perspective and culture and all kinds of cool things. I mean, like maybe it's just me getting old, but I value that more than a good fight. And that shift has changed for sure. So in terms of barriers, I still see some racism happening for sure. Before it used to bother me a lot, and now I challenge it a lot more. So if I see people putting barriers in front of me, I'll call that out for sure, because part of it too is it's a game. If I see racism, that I'm gonna call it for what it is. I'm gonna have a respectful discussion about it, of course, because I want to make sure that my perception isn't wrong and such. But pretty good at reading people as well too. So I faced some barriers coming back, but not a lot. Like there weren't really that much as far as I could see. There was one that actually, there was a huge barrier that I faced, and it was actually for I ended up wondering. I was trying to figure out some things here on a path that I was following, and got some feedback, and then I realized that I had a barrier with someone who had a huge issue with me from 5-6 years ago, and is using that against me with others. So in conversations of room that I'm not allowed to defend myself into. And I think everyone's got stories like that in the SCA or to some degree or whatever. Actually, not even SCA, just world in general. So barriers for me, yeah, that's one of them for sure. But what keeps me going is really just the love of what I do. Strip the awards, strip everything away. And ultimately what I'm always fighting for is always, and I've never really shared this with anyone as well too, because I don't think anyone really cared to ask, but I'll share it here. What does Draven fight for when he's out on the field? Well, I fight for the fact I'm Indigenous, and there's so few of us. Fight for the fact that I was one of the first Indigenous white scarves to ever break that barrier and shatter that baby, despite 10 years, and seeing 5 to 6 people get in for 5 to 6 years or whatever and just make it through. And I had to slog on for 10 years, but that's my journey. I mean, that's who I am. What I fight for is Indigenous people, so that they maybe when they say, well, that person seems really good at a demo or whatever it is, and I had to take my mask off, and then they realize that I'm Indian as well too. And it doesn't matter if they're Indigenous or non-Indigenous, and they say, oh, wow, that's cool. Because I think the more representation out there, most of all, fight for the honor of who I represent on the field, which is my wife and my kids as well too. So those are my inspiration as well too. So there's a lot of that I fight for. Bottom line though, my motto is this: I fight because I can. And I know that at any point, my body's whatever going to break down, or something tragic may happen, and I can't fight for no more. And it's honestly just an honor to go out there and just to fight. And it's not about the winning or anything now. It's just about going out there and fighting for the enjoyment of it, and challenging everyone around me as well too. And just breaking down barriers. Like I've always been the underdog. Like my story when I started in the SCA was, I think in the first couple of years, I was on welfare. Couldn't afford to go to events because I was that damn poor. Fought with a fiberglass sword that everyone made fun of, and I bought like my doublets and everything like that. That I had to commission, barter, and trade. I was barely legal on the field in a sense that I had to hand stitch or speed sew stuff on, and I'd make deals with people that were traveling out of my branch in Ramsgard to say, hey, I can't even afford. I can give you $10 for gas. But what I'll do is I'll be your slave for the weekend. I will take down your tent. I'll put it back up. I'll pack you up, and I would sink for my food. So for those people who know me back then, because I used to do Bardic, so I'd sink for my food, for my supper and stuff there. But I hustled. I did whatever it took to get to a point where I could go to events, and the armor got better. The swords became steel. And now I'm in a place where I don't have to worry about that. But I came from really humble roots. And it was all for the love of what I did. And for me, it was an opportunity to actually win respect. And I think that's, I think it's important for that. I mean, one of the books I read was, especially I think it was around men and women. Then they said women want love and affection. Men, what they crave is respect. And for me, that's all I ever wanted was to be seen and to have that respect, for sure. And now it's not even so much as what I crave anymore. It's just more to go out there and do what I do. But yeah, it's funny how that when you're talking and you say something and it just resonates and you're like, whoa, that just hit me like a like a stiff wind or something like that. So thank you for that pause there. But yeah, that's, in terms of barriers, yeah, I fight those to this day still, just to be relevant. I mean, that's a huge thing for sure. And I'll continue that really in this game and in other areas as well too. So, but in real life, yeah, I kick butt. I do. And I love that as well too, because I think in life and in anywhere, even if you win only in your home and your family and you're the hero there, I mean, that counts. That definitely counts for something, for sure. So, and that by the way gives me confidence in the SCA as well too, because I know at the end of the day, it's on the weekends, and when I go back to the office and the work that I do in the community and the many boards and experience and everything that I'm doing in the background, I mean, that more than makes up for it for sure. But when you're losing everywhere, yeah, that really sucks. I can see how that could be really isolating for some people. So thank you.
No, absolutely. Thank you for sharing such personal information and your personal experiences. It is not easy to come into public spaces and be your authentic self. And really, this is what we appreciate about this space, is the authentic self. I wanted to switch gears to something you had previously said, and talking about barriers and really being, did you say the first Indigenous player white scarf?
I checked back in the day. They had someone that was, I think the closest to it was would have been considered in Canada Métis, so half Indigenous. And I looked around for, I think, probably about 6 months online, everywhere, all the kingdoms and such. And so I know an antir for sure. So I'm hoping now that this is out there in the SCA. If there's another one, whew, I want to know you. I want to raise my hats to you. How come I didn't hear from you? So if there's another one, that would be totally awesome. I don't have to be the first, but that's, but it's putting it out there as well too. And that was in 2010 when that happened. So it was pretty awesome.
So 11 years later, you still don't have a record of anyone else. That's really disappointing. And so my question would be, how do we pave the way for more Indigenous players to come in and be able to participate in a game that welcomes them, that sees them, that hears them, that includes and really gives people the opportunity to be their authentic selves and still succeed in this, I mean, for lack of a better word, it really is a supremacist culture. So how do we break down barriers for Indigenous people specifically?
I think one of the steps is definitely the representation, but also just like anywhere else in especially DEI or EDI work, it's having the people that are leaders or people of color, Indigenous people in positions of leadership or whatever have you, or input, especially input on whether it's policy change or anything. I mean, that's always the first. I always find the first step, because those people, like myself, if I'm asked about how do you do that, you're going to hear some differences. It's not all the same, especially for people of color. We're different for a reason. So and our cultures are very very diverse and wonderful as well too. So I think having those voices not only at the table but lead in that, and that's a big change. To me, some people they say, "Oh, okay, no, Draven, I've heard this before," and it's like, no, this is a huge shift between having your king and queen, your prince and princesses, your people on the board of governors. These are the ultimate leadership right there. Is when you have in this case Indigenous people at those levels. And I'm definitely, I'm trying. I'm not going for the bod yet, but in other areas certainly, it's to add the voice and the representation in there as well too. I mean, I was on the first Antir DEI council that they had. And and I got invited in, and we had a great time, and I think there's some things that happened, and then they formed a new one, which was great, and they said, Draven, you should go on that one, and I made actually a choice on that as well too, because a part of me was like, okay, I can continue to use my voice to make great changes in the Kingdom of Antir, and then I was like, or I can go on my own, follow my path, follow my heart, and do the work. Still support DEI, because I didn't. Some people thought I had issues. I had no issues. I had messages with so many people on the council to say, hey, I'm here for you. I support the work you're doing. And if you need me as a resource, you know where to find me. And they have, absolutely, on perspective of different things. Where I put my energies towards were the Indigenous voices and supporters. It's a group on the SCA. It's a closed group. And it was started really more or less from the idea of Her Grace Kiva from Antir, who is a tremendous ally and such, and said, no, we should do this. And I wanted to do that, but you know what? And I'll point that out for allyship. I know you're going to have a question about that, maybe a segue into it too. She is one of the ultimate hype people, for sure. And so she pushed that in such a good way, because I thought, yeah, we could do that and such, and Mir's on there as well too, and it turned out to be something really great. Little drama at first when we first started, but whatever. You got to take that in any organization shift, and we got the drama out of there. So, but it's a wonderful group. It really is, the shift I see with that group is it truly is. It is run by the Indigenous peoples, and the supporters take a back seat, which is really the intention of that. And that's where I put my energy into, because it was closer to home. It was closer to really something that I feel I could put my energy to. And it hasn't gone as far as I would have liked, but guess what? That's Indigenous too. It's organic. It grows when it has to. And some people step up in big ways and such. But bottom line, to me, it's a safe, encouraging environment, and there's not too many places that are safe for people of color online, and that is one of them. If there's anyone ever goes on there and just that, like, weird comments don't last more than an hour on that site. Like they get squashed and that person gets booted. There's no open we don't put up with crap on there. And I know probably as a result of this, there'll be more requests and such. So I'm just going to give a disclaimer on that as well too, is we'll vet you if you're a supporter. You don't get a free pass to get in there. That environment is for Indigenous peoples first and foremost. It is not to flood that place with 90% supporters and 10% Indigenous and such there. So I've as a moderator, I've said no to people because I'm just like, I just don't think you're authentic enough. And you know what? It's interesting because I've heard of horror stories of other moderators. I haven't gotten that flack. And I've actually reached out to people too and said, hey, how many messages where I've said no to them. And then I'll say, these are the reasons why. And I just want to clarify. And they've absolutely ignored me. So I'm like, good riddance. So that's where I put my energies into for sure. And I found that, whatever you put in, you want to make sure that there's value. Life's too short for wasted time. And not that DEI was a waste of time. I just knew I didn't have enough to do that work because I'd already kind of did a little bit of it. And I knew I could give whatever energy I had to the SCA Indigenous voices. So, yeah.
Thank you for that work. I think that the affinity spaces are so powerful. I don't know, Gigi, if you've experienced some of them, but just the support and the belonging, part of having pages like that and groups like that really is to be able to share and validate the experiences that folks don't really understand. And one of the ways that I hope we can help supporters move forward is talk about, like you said, kind of the allyship. And so either in the group, what you look for in supporters, or in general, what are some of the requests of people in the Indigenous players group about how they can be supported in general by the SCA or allies?
Sorry, say your question again. I was kind of reading as you're going along. So it was about allies and supporters.
Yeah, what are some of the pieces of advice or some themes that come up with Indigenous players about how we can support and be allies. Because the word allies really, I mean, it's this term that, you know, I go back and forth with, well, you're not an ally until I say you're an ally, and you demonstrate being an ally. So what are some ways that we can be supporters to the Indigenous community?
I think, yeah, in some ways, yeah, there's, yeah, and it's, I know allies is tough for sure. I know, and I'm thinking about back really to the discussion that happened previously, Gigi and like, I was like, wow, that resonated with me so much for sure. I don't even know what to call it. Someone that's on board, because ally just means like that, like, no, even in World War II, allies in Axis, or no, what is an ally as well too is usually it's someone that comes to your defense, someone that's always there, someone that's always got your back. So if someone's an ally of mine, it means I can trust them. It means that they're loyal. It means that they understand. And the loyalty for me is a big thing. Like, for those that know me, it's huge. It's massive. There are things that I've done that are loyalty based. For sure. I'm definitely one of those people where I don't care who the heck you are or what hat you wear. if you mess with anyone that I love and that I have loyalty to in some form of relationship, you're going to hear it. I'll start off nice, and then the wolf in me will come out. So for allyship, that's to me what it represents. And there are very few people, honestly, that I like. I'm in contact with so many people, and they're really a handful. I'm not going to mention them. There's need to be that as well too, but they know who they are. And to me, that's an honorific title, and that has to be earned. And you don't just earn it 5 years ago. You continually earn that. Allyship for me, especially to Indigenous people, is not just about wearing the badges and what's popular. It's not about just wearing the orange shirt days and coming out in the fall. It's not about donating just to GoFundMe pages and such. There, allyship goes deeper than that. It's people like where I live in Kamloops, BC, and Tecumloops, Shuswap territory. Like I saw that, like, that was huge. So when they call them the misted, by the way, that's the term that they use. And they have I've yet to receive the pronunciation. I think it's called Ixtaway or something, which means missing in Secwepemc. And that's what they refer to the 215 children that were found through ground penetrating radar as well too. So allies are the first to jump to the cause, and they don't always and here's what an ally is to me. They don't have, like, and you know this as well too. So I think for people, hopefully, to explain this is every one of you has that one person where if something happened to you, your cat just died or someone just died, they know exactly what to do. They're not texting you or phoning you or something. They get over to your house and they give you a hug, or they speak your language in terms, and they don't need to ask what they need to do. And they don't bother you with incessant emails and all this other stuff. They just do it. They phone you up, or they contact you, or they reach out in the way that they know is respectful to you. That's an ally. And there aren't many allies out there. And so I have high expectations for that. And I've seen it all. I work in business development. We have 30 partners, and we're talking like huge partnership relationships. Some of them like earned $10 million off of us over the last 2 years and didn't reach out at all when 215 souls were found. I wouldn't consider them an ally. They'd be like the anti-ally in some ways. It's allyship, and no, to I think if someone's saying it, like I think you, some speakers before me had said as well too, if you're saying it, you're not it. It's kind of like if you're saying, I'm the leader, you're not the leader. And everybody's kind of chuckling or whatever, because that's the truth. Leaders don't have to identify themselves. Their actions and their words carry sway and hold as well too. And it's the same thing for allyship as well too. Is they're not taking selfies at the monument, and they're not saying this is what I'm doing and capture not. They just bear down and say this is what needs to be done. I'm going to fold close because like we're doing evacuation. They just come in there and they do that, and you don't ask what needs to be done. You prepare and because you already have a relationship. That's a key. So I think if you're in allyship and you want to strive for that, I think it's I think it's not necessarily a title that you receive. The greatest compliment you could ever be given to someone from an elder or someone in high esteem, whether it's a chief or a leader, or someone who's really respected, is not even anything like a feather. It's not even any jewelry. It's not even horses. It's the acknowledgement with just a simple nod that you're a good person and that they respect you. That's it. That's an ally, is someone that does that. And they don't do it for the titles, and they don't do it for the thank you. They do it because someone that they love is hurt, and they will do everything they can to make the hurt go away and make life easier on that person. And so that's a tough standard to have. And so and I've seen it with chief and council. I've seen it with so many interactions of people saying, I want to help out and such. And then there's those that just say, here you go. I can't imagine the pain, but this is all I have. This and this is what I have to give, and I wish I could do more and such. So for allyship, it really is going down that dark path. That's why people don't do it. Why do people don't do it? Because it hurts. Because if you knew the pain, if you knew, you can imagine how hard it is for those. And this is why some people go down that road, because it hurts. Like every time, like I know I had so many people contact me and say, they're crying. They're like, I can't imagine, especially if you're a parent. And they're like, I can't imagine. I'm like, well, yeah, try it when you've had all of your life, going through that much pain, and it's closer and it's nearer. And that's what the pain of the Indigenous people has as well too. So when that happens, I'm not even from Tecumseh. I've been here since '94. They've been nothing but welcoming and have taught me many things in this area. So, but I'm not related to 215 children that are still in the ground. But holy, do I ever feel it? Do I ever feel the weightedness? And I work in the building that is a former residential school. So you want to talk about closeness as well too. So, and I'll say this as well too. When this all happened, even to date, I had only 2 people ever ask me perspective on that. And these were private conversations as well too. Only 2 people out of others just to say, hey, do you want to just talk and swear, cry, anything like that? None of that. I had 2 people from the SCA that did that. So what I needed during that time, yeah, maybe was a bit of that. But nobody wanted, but you know what? Nobody wanted to go down that path because it was dark, because it was painful for them, because they're like, well, I don't know how he's going to react or I don't know what he's going to say. But yeah, and some of those kind of dark moments, and I had my places to go. So it wasn't like I never went anywhere. Like I have outlets and I have good people I can talk to as well too. But in terms of offering, 2 people. And those are one of the handful, 2 people that I would consider real allies in that sense, to really understand. So hopefully that answers your question.
No, thank you. Really powerful words, and I think they can translate it. So I guess my follow-up would be, what can we do in the SCA to build support? Because I hear being an ally, or what I'm gonna air quotes ally, right? That is done on a very personal level. But if someone came in as a newcomer and said, how can I build up, how can I support Indigenous players, what would that look like?
It's funny you ask this because I got asked this recently as well too. It's got to be led by Indigenous people. I've been asked for counsel on this as well too. So this is not a new question. I've had baronies, I've had people from different kingdoms ask kind of my perspective on this, and the answer is, I'll also give you the same thing, is that if you want to do it right, it's absolutely got to be led by Indigenous people. If crowns out there, or prince and princesses, or people in baronies, people in positions of those areas, and they say, I want to do this and everything like that, it's not authentic. It's got to be led by Indigenous people. And you may not understand that, and you may feel that you have sway in those areas, but until you get Indigenous people involved, I'll tell you, it's fake. No, you're gonna see me not go in those areas, and you think that you're gonna honor me in some ways by speaking on behalf of or whatever, but you're gonna see me turn my back on those things. It's absolutely got to be led by Indigenous people. No, it's if you're in positions of power, you need to give space and figure out what that is. Your voice is not need to be the voice. You need to elevate others. And great leaders do that. Great leaders get the hell out of the way, and provide the podium and the floor for others in order to do that. And I think there's very few great leaders out there. So to me personally, any initiative that doesn't involve, first thing I look for, who's there, who's leading it, and has that input. And there's been some good work with certain areas, and I won't mention who they are and such, but they have their person leading it, and that person is taken on the mantle, and they are Indigenous, and it's phenomenal. And I always look at that and I say, great, it's in good hands. So it's not just asking for, I guess, my permission or perspective, but always the advice is that it has to be led by, and it's not a rubber stamp where it's consultation. That's what my daily job is. We do air quotes with consultation too. We've been consulted with treaties. No. You can't just consult with us until you hear the right answer. It's absolutely has to be led by us, and you're going to see that more and more for Indigenous people. So is that we for instance, for Tecumlus, the chief speaks only to the media. No one else does. I could work on a project that's like $10 million in revenue. She's going up there and speaking. I might get a little part there of 30 seconds. That's it. And I have no problem with that. The reason why is I'm not from that nation, and rightfully so. She should speak more than anyone. And if I get a spot in there, that's cool. Whatever. I don't need to. And such. I can continue do the work in the background. And that's me being a non-band member of a nation and serving in that area. So I put my ego in check and know where I stand in terms. And I think, and the reason why I say that is I think other people, when you're in those positions, I think you need to do the same thing as well too. It's a little hard at first, but you know what? Once you see the magic that happens when Indigenous people or people of colors lead these initiatives, they'll do a way better job. And you know what? They'll make you look good. And this game ultimately will achieve its purpose of being more inclusive, because other people that are coming in as newcomers will see that. And they look for those kinds of things. I mean, like, especially people of color, Indigenous, you look for safety. You first see what is the representation there and who's who. And if you don't see the people of either like mind or skin color or ethnicity or whatever it is, and you're searching, and you just don't see that, you're going to go to the next game that's out there as well too, that maybe has that, until you find a place that's safe. I was just stubborn. No, I seen a handful of Indigenous people come and go in the SCA. I was just stubborn. I had goals, and I wasn't going to stop until I achieved them. And so that's really my story, is that, people, well, no, you turned out great, Draven, of course, because they point to me. And it's like, no, I was stubborn. I wasn't about to let you win. Are you kidding me? Like, I had a lot to gain, and I wanted to create space for others. And that was, and like, I got attacked just because like, total double standards. I know anyone who's faced adversity, you were like, seriously, you're giving me crap for the same thing that person's just doing right over there in this, like, within a span of 5 minutes. But I'm the guy getting the whatever, the problems for it or whatever. Prime example here in Antir. So it's perfectly okay. And Pierce, by the way, is a good body. Pierce O'Brien, not this. There's another Pierce not here. Pierce O'Brien, flamboyant cavalier guy, totally like kills with style, coup de grace. Could go out there and do that. I fight a similar fight, and I would get flack for my coup de grace. Well, that's arrogant. Draven, well, no, look at him showboating and everything like that. And Pierce and I, like, we love each other. We're brothers. Like, and I'd say, yeah, it's like, how. Do you ever get that, Pierce? Like, where people are like, he's like, well, a little, but, and it's like, well, I get it all the time with this. And he's like, brother, it's okay. It's okay. So, I mean, that's what I mean by double standards as well too. And I point him out because his fight and my fight were similar. No, and I had the moniker of being arrogant because I utilized style points, but someone else would do it in the exact same list field, and he'd be applauded for that as well too. So, yeah, hopefully that helps with the newcomer. And I'm huge in terms. I was shadowing for my branch as well too. So for the last for about, I think, prior to COVID, I just stepped down for a 2-year stint there. So I did a lot of shadowing work and inclusivity and such. And what I found is there had to be a lot of hand holding as well too. So and a lot vested, especially with newcomers coming in as well too. So yeah.
I want to talk a little bit kind of to the audience about inclusion, and it really is not an afterthought. It is, as you're forming a panel, as you're forming a work group or a committee, that you reach out and ensure that you have folks from diverse backgrounds. And I've heard the term diverse used as in diverse personas. And let me be clear, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about diverse cultural backgrounds, making sure that you have brought in Indigenous voices, that you've brought in Black voices, that you've brought in all of the voices that are necessary to create an inclusive atmosphere. And not just that, making sure that they have a voice. Now, we talked about in the first episode, it's I can't speak for all Black or African American, or my dad's from Haiti, so Haitian Americans. And we still need to have those voices, especially if those voices have contacts with the larger groups. That is really important, that the community feels heard. And then going a step above that, when the community gives you information, that you use it. That this is not performative. We have our token folks around the table. It is listening to what they have to say and integrating that. And then asking for feedback. Am I on the right track? Are we on the right track? Are we meeting the right needs? It's more than just, contacting someone, Draven, like you said, consult. It really is, and it cannot be an afterthought. It really is creating the groups from the beginning. I think that a lot of times when people hear the word Indigenous, they don't quite know what it means. Draven, would you like to speak to that? And then to the kind of similar to what Jessica and Giada talked about, was that there are differences between native areas, between native people, and that people don't always realize how vast and different they are.
Sure. For being Indigenous is like it used to. Here in Canada, and I know in the US as well, US has got some interesting rules for sure, especially they have blood quantum. I thought we were crazy on our north of the border here, but they actually measure that stuff. And then they utilize the systems as well too, which we have systems in our area as well too, that really reinforce divisions between the various what is Indigenous. So Indigenous is people that are no, for lack of a better term, like First Nations. Doesn't matter if it's status or not status. It's if you're First Nations. The other group we have is the Metis culture, and that's people who are of mixed blood. Predominantly it was French back in the day, but there were other Scottish and English and others in there as well too. So it is a distinct culture here, especially in Canada. I don't know if that's, I don't know enough about, I really know nothing, very little in terms of the American side. And the other is Inuit as well too, which is more of the Northern Indigenous, and they are a very unique group as well too. And they actually have a large territory, which used to be called all of Northwest Territories, but now it's called Nunavut. So they have a lot more, I would say, independence in that area. So, but in terms of like different Indigenous groups within like BC is massive. It's interesting. BC has the most numbers in terms of Indigenous, like over any other province or territory. Like it's just this area, for whatever reason, the geography and everything has the most distinct nations that are in there. And then you'll see others, like you'll see like, I don't know, I know off the top of my head, I think you might see like 10 in Alberta. And then right next door, it's like 60 to 70, like so distinct groups. So in terms of being, I would say First Nation, it's really diverse in terms of the culture, and you could be literally a couple 100 kilometers away, and it's a different language and it's a different culture in terms of some took slaves, and then 200 kilometers away, they didn't take slaves. They added them into their family. Like I have discussions with the various other First Nations on that as well too, in terms of like some of them are highly territorial. If you entered the territory, they'd kill you on the spot. Others would be, hey, welcome. Yeah, just don't mess up things. And by the way, this is temporary. So you're welcome to hunt here, but you got to move on. and so some of them were like that, and others would just shoot you on the spot because you're in their area and they just figure it's a trespass and you want to, do bad things and such. So yeah. So I hope that answers your question. In the past, it used to be like, there were people that, and this is part of lateral violence as well too. And it's part of the government's way to really kind of separate us all. And so people who are status First Nations would just like would treat Métis bad, and vice versa, and Inuit as well too. By and far, you don't see that as much. We recognize each other. If you're Métis, you're Métis. I honor you for who you are, and it's like I'm not competing with you. I would say probably 20, 30 years ago, there's a little bit more negative sentiment. But I think we've all realized that, you know what, that's exactly what they want in terms of colonialism, is for us to keep fighting for whatever scraps are on the table, and our power is with the unity of each other as well too. And I've seen that happen in many circumstances with the Métis and the Inuit and First Nations, status or non-status. So hopefully that answers your question there.
It does. Thank you. I went to, it was a symposium or conference somewhere, and one of the most impactful things I heard was, she said, Native Americans are the only people that have to prove by blood who they are, or who they say they are, in order to receive what is rightfully theirs. And that has sat with me for so long, because this was a good, 10 years ago. And that has sat with me to this day and will continue to sit with me through this day. So I think folks, we forget that there are groups that are, and I may be completely wrong, but from my experience, what I've seen are Native American, First Nation, Indigenous, that those groups are really the quietly oppressed. I can't speak for Canada. I can speak for the States, that it's often the, those people over there, and then everybody else. And so I guess I'm just curious on how to amplify Indigenous voices in a space where y'all are not well represented, or maybe not as visible. I don't know. I'm not in any of the groups. So how do we help amplify?
Yeah, that's I remember seeing that too, and I mean, that's always one thing. I mean, I look at other groups, especially people of color, and I see how they've really evolved. And there's two schools of thoughts. One is you could be jealous, and you could say, "Hey, they're taking our piece of the pie. What the heck?" We're here first. Like, there's so many narratives that really go in a negative space, and then, but you also have to check yourself as well too. For me being Indigenous, is to say, no, it's exactly the kind of thinking, us versus them, and I'm like, that's exactly what would be perfect, is us fighting Black people, us fighting Latinx people, like because they're starting to move ahead and such there. And I'm like, no, we can't go down that narrative as well too. So I don't do that at all. I'm like, no, I absolutely, I don't see, I see their victories as our victories as well too. And I think that unity together, and it's not like, that's the other part of it too, is you could look at scarcity, which is really what I know my upbringing, there was very scarce in terms of where I'm coming from. And like, you could look at it like that, where there's so few resources and everything. And that's, and I've gone there before in the past and such, and you know what, it doesn't do nothing. It's just negative behavior. And I think the biggest thing for moving ahead and amplifying the voices is that is celebrating that. And I saw a perfect example of that when they had the Sikh community and showed up in motorbikes and such. And I saw something pretty powerful. It was pretty cool. So they showed up in their motorbikes, and they had a couple of their for lack of I know that's not what they call it's not a pastor, but it's a spiritual leader. And they did a prayer, Sikh prayer on the steps of the residential school. And they did this about 2 weeks after the announcement happened. So they're one of the few people and groups that showed up en masse. and there was about 40 of them. They did a prayer in their language and such, and they all prayed, and it was really powerful seeing that. And one of the guys, the gentleman went up there and spoke, and he said, we share a common enemy, and that's colonial Britain and what they've done to us. And it's like, we know your history, you know our history, and we share your pain. We understand what you're going through, how you've been oppressed. And he's like, heck, our farmers in India, they're going through that right now. And so when we heard what you're going through, we hear your pain, we feel your pain. We're one of the few people that do, and we're sorry that we didn't join your fight in the past, but we are here now. And I was like, holy crap, man. A lot of people crying around me and such there, and nodding and such, and tears flowing and everything like that. And then the chief was there too. And that is really amplifying the voice as well too, is showing up to those uncomfortable types of things and saying, I stand with you. I think there's nothing more powerful when someone who truly understands, and even if you don't, to just show. Like I go to because I work there, but I go in the evenings as well too, and it's interesting, that spot. And by the way, if you're ever thinking of going to Kamloops and you're thinking, well, I don't want to piss off the natives there, or I don't want to piss off the people, I best leave them alone. You don't understand anything about the Secwepemc people. I've lived here since '94. They are some of the most welcoming people. In their pain, and keep in mind, in their pain, they open up that monument for people. So I go there in the evenings and I'll drive by and see. And guess what? There are no fewer than 5 or 6 people. And I see plates from 3-4 provinces over. I see plates from Ontario, and they drive there to drum, to meditate, to sing, to cry freely. So if your excuse is like, oh, I don't want to piss off the Indians, or I'm not sure, get your butt over to Kamloops. And like, if you're from Vancouver or whatever, you're in BC, you got no choice. You got no excuse. No, travel restrictions are over. Like, come down here and understand and feel what's going on here, to really understand what's happening. You will be impacted. You think you're impacted by global news or whatever and such. Come here on your own time and sit and see the 215 lights that light up right in front of the residential school, and the monument full of stuffed toys and everything that honor the children as well too. And those are ways you could do that. And I guarantee you'll be changed as well too, more than any book will ever give you, and more than any YouTube or TikTok that you're going to hear. And it will touch and affect you for sure. And those are the types of things that so you want to talk about amplifying voices, is that's go where the people are talking, and understand at a deeper level, at a human level, what they're going through. And you know what? The fire in your belly, in terms of if you think you're given now, and if you think you're compassionate, will be that much greater for sure. And that's my best advice for people is this. We're going through historic change here, not only in this country, in this world, for Indigenous people, both sides of the border, from the States to Canada as well too. And no, what are you going to tell your kids? What are you going to tell your grandkids? That and then they're going to say, well, geez, you lived in Kelowna. Did you go over 2 hours to go check things out, or to see, or did you go check? No, I mean, we're reading about this in history books. And what are you going to tell them? That you stayed at home where you were comfortable, and you saw it on the news, and that you cried, and then you didn't do nothing. Amplify the voices, share in our pain, share in the experience. These are all of these events and everything that's happening. Like, they've had unity rides with horses, if you like horses. They've had motorbikes for Sikhs, so if you like to ride bikes. They've had big rig trucks so if you're a trucker. They've had walks as well too, if you're a walker. Like, there's no excuse, there's no reason. You want to amplify the voice, come where the people are speaking and hear, and then tell others about how it's impacted you as well too. That's how I think you amplify the spirit and the message of what's happening. And they used to do that in the past. That's what would happen. I mean, bards over every culture are some of the most respected people, because they would travel where these events and everything would happen, and they would bring that message back through word and through song. And that's how we got a lot of our history. Every culture had something like that. And so continue that on. It was a good thing. And it's a great way to tell a story as well too, and also to be human. So thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I wanted to, since I've been talking for so long, I wanted to give Gigi an opportunity to ask any questions she may have.
I actually think you covered a lot of the topics that I wanted to hear, Draven's mind on. I do want to ask, what is the best way for people to contact you if they are wanting to reach out for you? If that Indigenous rapier person is out there, that white scarf, how do they get in contact with you to meet you?
Facebook's definitely, I specifically had a Facebook profile. I don't have any other Facebook profile other than the SCA one here. So, and it was just because that's the medium that most of the SCA utilizes to communicate and such. So feel free to reach out to me through those means if you have any questions or perspective and everything. Of course, the Indigenous Voices page and supporters as well too is another way to reach out. I will kind of put a disclaimer that it's not, and this will probably come across in the wrong way. It's not Ask an Indian. So if you're thinking, hey, I want to learn more about Indigenous culture, and I'm thinking of doing an Indigenous period kit and everything like that, there's certainly people on there that know the answers to those questions, but that's not really the intent of the forum. Is to be an educational forum for supporters or people asking questions. So I always encourage people, if they're going through there and they're like, am I a supporter? And if you're willing to shut up and listen more than you talk, you're probably on the right track there, and you can learn from others that are on there, and really elevate the voices that are on there that are Indigenous. And I find that group's pretty good as well too. Not that non-Indigenous people can't speak. Certainly ask a question, that's fine. No one ever tells you that's off base, but those are kind of the two ways to get in touch with me as well too. I think one of the things I'll say that a lot of people may be surprised at is the perspective. I'm actually disappointed in that as well too. It's especially with Tecumloops and what they've gone through, I want to share that. No, and so some people are like, well, I don't want to ask Draven about that, even if they know me or if they don't know me. I don't want to ask what it's like. And I was like, no, I want to share. I want to share this experience because that's the education that exists, especially if it's on a one-on-one versus a book or something that's out there, versus me being able to tell kind of the narrative or the story or what the impacts of what it is as an Indigenous person seeing this happen. And just tremendous given, despite the fact. So this nation had this happen, now it seems like a couple months ago. So they've had that, and they've had a number of other things happen, such as right now there's forest fires in BC. So as much as they're mourning, they're welcoming all the evacuees and firefighters, and they're feeding them, and they're housing them, and they're doing so many things like providing cell phones and all these other things for them, and they're mourning. And so I really want to highlight that this nation, as much as it seems like it's on their knees, they have a lot to give, and they're very resilient. And I don't think many people would be able to do that, given the emotional turmoil, and be able to host someone. I don't know if you had a funeral or whatever, would you be able to put 16 people up in your house as you're in mourning and everything? I don't think many people would be able to do that. So I think if people are willing to reach out and have a dialogue and such and ask questions, that's not off board. That's not off base. For some people it is. So I'm not going to, of course, speak for any other Indigenous people. But for me personally, I'm willing to share those things and some of those experiences and ask questions. And if it's off board, I'll let you know in a nice way. So, but I welcome those kinds of things. I just feel it's my role. I'm one of the few people that's Indigenous and pretty active and is willing to speak. So yeah.
And the other thing is I haven't asked a lot of questions because I wanted to really just open my heart and open my soul and hear what you had to say and glean as much as I could from the words that came out of your heart. Because the way you speak reminds me of me being on the floor at my great grandmother's house and listening to her and my great uncles talk. And it was just like, you know, I got so much from that just listening. If I think of things, and you've been open in the past with me saying, hey, if you want to know things, ask me. If you want to come visit, and when it is safe, I will want to come and visit and learn more on location when it is safe, you know, and the borders are open. But I just want to thank you for sharing everything that you've shared. It's an honor to sit here and listen and to glean what I can from your words and your heart and your experience.
Thank you for sure. That invitation's definitely open for sure to stop by in the area for sure. There's a lot of that learning lessons. It's got to be in person if possible. Yeah, and things become safer than for sure. One of the things I wanted to chat about, I was looking at kind of my notes here that I did want to mention that is totally SCA relevant as well too. Me and my wife did an event here, and what do you know? The troublemaker Kiva, she's probably laughing now. She's like, "Why don't we do some kind of a fusion event that involves Indigenous and also the SCA artisans?" And so I'm Draven. I'm a fighter. I do ANS. I do I'm not even like apprentice standards by any stretch at all. I try. I attempt. And so I know it's one of those things where I'm not like I don't have a goot. So no award that I have is ANS at all. So I'm not an ANS person. So she had the great idea and said, why don't we do a fusion event with Indigenous artisans and SCA artisans teaching classes side by side, like many of the kingdoms and areas do. And she said, but it's going to be Indigenous. Like it's really going to be Indigenous theme. And I was like, okay. I said, well, not too enthused. I said, but I like the Indigenous part. And it was also a challenge because this has never been done before, as far as I know. And there's another challenge out. If anyone's done it before, let us know. We called it Miko Wigwan, which is Cree for red feather. And we hosted that a couple of years ago. And it was as far as we know, the very first Indigenous artisan event. And we had people that were at Metis, we booked probably about, I think, 6 or 7 Indigenous craftspersons. These are experts. So you know how we love Laurel and the SCA. These are Laurel level experts that do basket weaving, that do storytelling, that make flutes, that do medicines, everything like that. And then, you know what? We had the SCA as well too. Some Laurels in there and other artisans that did their classes. And it wasn't like an Indigenous track and then an SCA track. It was like all together. We mixed it in there. So it was a true kind of fusion of that. And here's the thing. It was actually the first event. We expected that. It was a lower turnout on that, and I knew that too as well. I didn't expect like 200 people to show up. It was also I think we collected some site fee, but everything I think for the classes, we paid for the classes, so nobody had to pay anything. And keep in mind, some of the classes, if they would have paid, some of the fees would have been around $25-30 per class, like just for the materials and whatever went through there. So we did as much as we could to make it as inclusive as possible. We opened it up for the public, and some came. And so we had people taking classes. Great time by all. None of the Indigenous instructors were pissed off in any way. So there was no cultural protocols broken. It was really fun for them. Like every single instructor that I talked to from the Indigenous side, they were like, that was great. we didn't know what to expect, but it was great because everybody was so respectful and they listened, and I felt that I was valued. And I was like, awesome, total success there. I think we had maybe 50 people show up. That's the only sad thing. Here's the other sad thing. 2 of the key instructors on the Indigenous side have passed on. I had a feeling on, you know, I don't know, some people relate to this. I just had this feeling, and I was trying to promote this event, and I was putting myself out there, especially on the Indigenous side, because this is the first time Draven's like, I was like, oh, Indigenous, well, oh, yeah, I guess Draven's First Nation. Like, people were like, well, that's kind of cool. So, and I kept pumping this. I was like out there, I was going courts, and I talk about this, and I was like, come people, you got to make it. I just had this feeling like you got to come to the first one, because usually the first one is really special and it's so authentic and unique. And I was telling people, and people had every excuse in the book, and I'm not like belaying their excuses. So 2 of the instructors who are world-class Laurel level type people who have dedicated their whole lives, more than Laurel's do, because Laurel's like whatever, 10, 20 years. These guys, their whole damn life, 50 years into a craft or something, passed on. And I had a feeling. I didn't know their health. I didn't know anything about it, but I remember telling people with so much conviction in my heart, please make it. Please do whatever you can. I will, find a tent for you, or I will put you up. Like, we were offered space at our house and everything like that. And about 50 people came. And want to know what's crazy? Throw my Shire under the bus too. Half the people of the Shire didn't even make it. They were like, it's an Indian event. It's not SCA. And we're like, no, it's an SCA event. It just happens to have Indigenous. And they didn't show. They showed up to kind of chat with their person, and then they took off or whatever. So it became kind of a networking thing. I was disappointed in that, but I see more good, because here's the thing is we did an Indigenous event and we did a fusion of artisans, which, you know what? They speak the same language. They have the same appreciation for each other. And then people came to learn, learners and such. So there was some success, but there was some not so kind of great things. Would I do it again? Hell yeah, for sure. We plan to do that every 2 years. So COVID hit, and we plan to do that on a 2-year cycle. Eventually what we wanted to do was bring this. We wanted to actually have 2 years in Ramsgard, and then afterwards it would go to another place, and we would support the hell out of whoever that person is, whether it's stateside or whatever, but to get the traction going. So I wanted to mention that because it's one of the first ones, and if people are thinking about doing something similar, I think this answers some questions that you asked. You asked about barriers. It's like, no. And I don't know why people in the Shire because by the way, our events average usually at about no less than 80 to sometimes 120. So for that happened, I was heartbroken. I was like, come on, this is my branch. Like, I grew up here. I supported every damn event, even when it sucked. Because you can't win them all. And I was hurt by that for sure. And this is the first time I shared that publicly, because I was like, I put myself out there, put my culture out there, and I put myself on the line because I went out there and I knew these artisans. So for a lot of people didn't know that, except for Kiva and a couple key people, was that these were my people I respected, that were my mentors and heroes. And I invited them. The only reason they came, and it's not an ego thing. Some people think, oh, Draven thinks he's no. The only reason they came was because of me, because I promised them that no one would screw with them. And if anything happened, no, I deal with it, because I was running the event, and it went well on that. So I mean, that was the only thing. There's some good and bad to it. Overall, would I do it again? Oh yeah. But there'd be some changes, and but it showed me, you know what it showed me? How far the SCA's got to go. First ever Indigenous event, and is low attended. So it to me, it was a litmus test as to how ready was the SCA. and I'm not going to go so far to say they weren't ready. No, people that came, they came. And in and here's the thing, everybody who came were like, I'm so glad I came, because that event was so special in so many different ways, from the conversations to the classes to the time spent, that no one walked away saying, I could have found better time to spend on a Saturday, Sunday. Everybody who walked away from it was like, this is great. So but I think that's kind of a thing that needs to get working on as well too. So I think that event recognized a lot of things, a bit of a fusion for Indigenous and SCA, and that was bold. Like, for a lot of people, I don't know if you would do that. Like, this has put you on a spot, Gigi and Genevieve. Would you do that with your cultural people? And like, no, I know some people, I've heard comments where some of them are like, no, not ready for that. But yeah, I put it on the line for that event, and I would do it again, because I think those kinds of things need to happen more and more to get people on board, for sure.
So I do want to highlight a comment in the Facebook chat. It was a good way to help Indigenous people see a space that we fit in and are comfortable and accepted in. So if anything else, right, this was a place where people were able to see themselves in the SCA. And I think that's very important when it comes to people of color. Just being around people who understand your culture and live your culture. So I commend you for putting that on. And your answer, no, I probably wouldn't be comfortable doing an event around my personal culture. It is very vulnerable, and I appreciate the fact that you did it, and look forward to more to come. Just amazing work. You've done amazing work with the SCA.
And I think I would have to maybe take some notes from what, lessons learned from your event. If I ever wanted to do something really small, just to show the SCA to people from my culture, and vice versa, and provide a pleasant experience, maybe something like boutique, something very small, might be possible, might be a good way to do it in a safe way for them. But I would be very nervous about it, doing it the right way and everyone having a good time. It would be a lot of pressure. But I admire that you did that. And it's something that I can kind of look up to as maybe that's something I can do in the future.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, we intended it to be small. We didn't expect 150 people out, for sure. It actually went to expectations, for sure, on that. And we learned a lot, and we did a whole thing, I think, debrief at the end, lessons learned and everything. So overall, I'd say is a success as well too. But at the same time, it really showed me kind of where things are at. And that's a couple of years ago. So of course, some things have changed with mood, especially it changes in the SCA. So we would do it again, just because we committed to doing that as well too. So yeah, if there's any way it could help out with some just some perspective of how that happened and such, then yeah, that'd be awesome, for sure.
Was there anything that we missed that you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, actually, just one thing on just more on a perspective of service as well too. Just how service is kind of done in the SCA, and services means different things for different people as well too. And this is from Woodland Cree, what I've been taught of being Indigenous from Northern Alberta, from my reserve, which is Jean-Baptiste Gambler Reserve in Northern Alberta. It's about 50 clicks north of Athabasca. And how I was taught service was that you did service, and it was expected, it was taught by others who had already done that role and now had moved on to a different phase. And so they didn't do the same job that you did. And And these were roles as men and women at different ages. And so this is, so if you're a young person, for instance, and there's a feast, then automatically, if you are under kind of, for lack of a better term, but under the age of like, say, 18, you were expected to, as a young person, to go to an elder, which you probably were related to anyway, and say, hey, I would like to grab some food for you, and you basically you'd be their server. And so this is something that would just be expected, and you'd be taught this as well too. And sometimes your lesson was this, and now I'm in that role as an older person where I go to the younger ones and I say, hey, you should go to that elder over there, and serve them food and take care of them. Have you done this before? And they're like, sometimes they just say, yes, I know what to do. And they're like, okay, thanks for that. And sometimes they're like, no, what do I do? And I was like, do you know them? And they're like, no. And so I just tell them kind of the basics and I train them on that. But sometimes if I know them and I'm related to them, I'll be like, what are you doing? No, I'm coming. There's like two of them sitting there. What are you doing? There's an elder over there that is going to get their own plate. You're already failing. Get your butt over there and help them out and grab them some tea and ask them what they want. That's the roles and responsibilities that we had, and we were taught that, and it was ingrained into us to a point where all you would have, and I think anyone can recognize that as well too. If you've been raised in a house with certain standards of what you're supposed to do, all it takes is a look, and you're doing it. Like if you were like, someone gives you a look, whether it's an auntie or a mom or grandma or whatever it is, they just give you a look and you're like, oh, I've done something wrong. And you realize, I got to do this. And you cut your conversation short. I'm getting on this thread with service as well too, because that, for me, and this is not, keep in mind, my disclaimer, this is not all Indigenous people. But humility is a huge thing that I know is big within my people as well too. And we don't chase that glory with respect to service. In a lot of other areas, we do, absolutely. I kill someone in combat back then, like 200 years ago, not now. But no, I take credit for that. And there's this whole ceremony and everything around that. And I tell stories and things happen. There's certain marks of honor that has. And then that's just because it's an honor I earned. When it comes to service, no. Absolutely. You stay the hell away from that as possible on any accolades. As I mentioned before, the greatest acknowledgement as an Indigenous person, especially, from my area can receive is just a nod. It's not like we do this whole award ceremony for one night and talk about how great that person is. It's not even thank you. It's not even like letters written. It's not even gifts given. It's just a nod. That's how humble the people are that I have. So when I came into the SCA, talk about a culture shift where it's talking about like service, and they recognize that, and there's awards from it. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And I know those certain people too, because I've seen that. I've been around the SCA to know that there's people that will duck, like they just want to remain under the radar. So I've been pretty successful at doing that. And look up on my OP. You're going to see a lot of working with royalty, from princesses to queens to you name it. And I never did it as anything to get any award at all or anything like that. It was simply because it needed to be done, and they asked, or there was an opportunity. Every single time that I did retinue, it wasn't because I raised my hand up and said, hey, I want to serve you. I think you're friggin' awesome. No, I was asked every time. And it's not because I think I'm better or anything like that. It's just according to my culture, you don't step in those areas as well too in terms of service. And I bring this out because it's a different way. Like if we're doing this exercise and understand that the cultures are different, and then they're not going to mirror your own, or especially within society's standards of some things. So my point on this is, with service, it's not something, if I'm doing something, it's because it's my duty to do it. That's it. I'm not doing it because I need to get paid. I'm not doing it because I need recognition or anything for that. I'm doing it because it's within my ability to do that. And I pride myself when people ask me to do something, that if I'm able to do it, great. And that was always actually something that was taught to me by an elder. I think it's because I was given him. He asked me, and I complained to him, and I said, "You're always asking me. Why don't you ask one of the other kids?" I'm just curious on that. I'm not complaining. I'm just curious, like, no, so-and-so stronger than me. He could do all this, probably better and such. And then he gave me a lesson, and this is how Indigenous people are when they teach lessons. And this elder, he said to me, he said, "I asked you because I knew you'd do it and you wouldn't give me attitude." And he's like, "The type of person you should be and strive to be." And he's like, "I asked you because I knew in your heart of hearts that you would help and you'd be glad to do it." He's like, "You never want to," he's like, "don't be like those other kids where they complain when you ask them to do something, because guess what? No one will ever ask them to do that again." The type of person you want to be is, when someone asks you to do something, they know that you're not going to say no, especially if it's reasonable. And the other thing is, you always want to be that person that people come to and ask. He's like, means that you're approachable. It means you can not only do it, but it means you have that right attitude. He said, you never want to be the person that no one goes to as well too. So that's something that I've tried to strive for as well too, and that's true to my beliefs, and it's something that I'm always at odds with, and it's mainly with me. It's not for anyone external, and it's not to shower on anyone's parade that they get value from that, which there is value. I mean, anyone who does service, totally, they have that, and they've been doing it for years. But for me personally, no, it's not why I do it. And for our culture, we aim to keep our heads down, and the greatest thank you is just that acknowledgement and smile, and that's good enough for me. That's always, and if it never happens, means I got to do more. So I have no problem doing that. It's not the carrot for me, and I want to put out there, because that's an unpopular opinion. And some people get offended, especially if they're Pelicans and people who base their a lot of what they do in the SCA on that. And it's not to detract from them on that. It's just understand that some people like myself may not have those values, but it doesn't mean we're not serving. Doesn't mean I'm not helping out. Far from it, for sure. So so I just wanted to explain that one last piece, especially on culture. I've talked to people. Some people have kind of gotten they've taken it the wrong way, but that's really how I look at service in that sense. Always glad to help. Always willing. I take it as an honor that people ask, but no, not even looking for a thank you. To me, it's my duty. If I can do it, if I can help with a tent, I'll help with a tent or whatever. If it's guard duty or whatever else, then if it's within my capability, I'm always glad to help. So thank you so much for your time. And I note the time as well too, here almost at 2 hours. So thank you all for the opportunity, and those listening as well too. Feel free to reach me out. Pretty approachable guy, and would love to trade stories and share perspectives, and look forward to seeing a lot of you in person as well too. So, and thank you, Genevieve and Gigi, for having me on this show.
I really want to thank you for coming on. As with all of our guests, this is voluntary. I have not asked anyone anyone specific. That everybody's coming on to share their stories because they want to share their experiences in and out of the SCA, help build a culture of understanding and respect which leads to that culture of inclusion. So thank you, Draven, for coming on, being vulnerable, sharing your stories, the work that you do in and out of the SCA for Indigenous people. I always enjoy talking to you and hearing your words of wisdom. So I'm sure that not just myself and Gigi are taking a lot from the information you've given us today and you've shared with us today. So thank you very much. I want to, before we leave, announce the next person, and that is Lord Thainoch. And I know that I probably butchered that. I hope not. It will be in 2 weeks, and of course I can't find my date, August 3rd. And by then, Thainoch, I will have learned how to at least attempt to pronounce your entire SCA name, but it is beautiful when you say it, probably not as beautiful as when I say it. So join us in 2 weeks to have, again, another wonderful guest to continue these stories of both validating experiences, getting insight into different cultures, and learning from each other of how we can make the world and the SCA a better place. If you have any questions for Draven, you can find him. You can also email the page Voices of Color. Those emails will be filtered to me and we will answer any questions possible. So thank you all for joining us and have a great night.
Thank you so much.